My brother tricked our senile, dying father and tried to steal everything from the inheritance. Here's exactly how it went down. My brother tricked our senile, dying father into giving him all his fortune through his will. I got back at him by sabotaging his business. A few years ago, the doctors told us that there was not much time left in this world for our dad. They told us that it was best for him that he spent what was left of his life in his home surrounded by his loved ones in a familiar environment, instead of the grim and depressing sights one could get while hooked to a life support machine inside of a clinic. My dad was a successful businessman. He had several car dealership agencies all around the state and owned a few mall centers, along with some real estate that consisted of around 3 houses and 2 residential buildings. When we got of age, he made me, along with my brother and sister, partners in each of his car agencies. We were 4. All of us had a partnership with one specific agency, but he was the sole owner of the rest of his properties and activities. My mom passed away a few years earlier, so we were the only heirs. The rest of my brothers and sisters got pretty successful in their own respective field. 2 of them became big businessmen as well, while my sister pursued a career as a cello player and never really got interested in taking part of the family business. I myself lived in a humble life in comparison to them. I lived off my revenue from the partnership with my dad's agency, managed to buy a small supermarket store in my town, got myself a small farm in the outskirts, and invest the rest of my revenue in my son's college fund and retirement savings. Pretty good overall, but I felt like my business had just peaked, and with my capital at the moment, I could not achieve anything else above that. My dad was pretty sick. He spent the rest of his days inside his mansion, lying down on his bed or in his couch, just staring at nothing and being fed by his maids. I tried to visit him every weekend since he left the clinic. We used to have a little lunch and play some chess and talk about life and such. Around a month after he returned to his home, I got a message from one of my brothers. He told me that he thought it would be best for him to live with our dad and take care of him for a while. I thought it was a noble idea. Dad would be very happy to have one of his sons keep him in company every single day. I think that when you're at the end of your life and you're old and feeble, having around someone you love can bring you an invaluable joy. Innocent of myself to think that was all that was behind that decision. I kept visiting him, and each time I saw him more and more disoriented. I thought it was just the process of deterioration from his illness. But then I noticed he was taking more pills than usual. My brother told me he took him to another doctor for a second opinion, and he prescribed more drugs to keep him away from feeling any pains or discomfort. I was against it. Before the pills, he seemed happy, and he never expressed anything about pain. I noticed he was becoming more and more numb. It seemed like he wasn't even there. He just did as he was told and nodded with his head at every question we asked him. At one point, he became bedridden. He didn't walk nor speak anymore. I was devastated by seeing him like that. He was the man who raised me, my hero, the one I always thought to be invincible. Now, he was but a shade of the man I knew, and that saddened me deeply. My brother was always around when I went to my dad's house. I could not keep myself from feeling some sort of resentment towards him, since when he started living with my dad, everything went downwards regarding his health and liveliness. My therapist told me it was only natural to look for culprits when you can't face the loss of someone close to you, but I knew something wasn't right. It was much later that I came to know the truth. Well, my dad died one morning of autumn. My brother broke the news to me and the rest of the family, and all my brothers and sisters rushed to his house as soon as we could. 2 of them were living abroad. My sister in Germany and my other brother in Dubai. We got together, cried for our loss, and consoled each other. The one that was taking care of him arranged a solemn funeral service in the biggest cathedral in town. People from every social status assisted. My dad helped many people in his life, so him passing away ended up gathering many people. The church was brimming with mourners. My brother, that took care of my father, managed to build my dad a mausoleum in the graveyard. It was quite graceful and elegant. Everyone in the family was very thankful of him to take care of everything out of his own pocket. It was quite an act of selflessness and lovely, they said. I guess it was the least he could do as he was scheming behind their back. I spoke to my brothers that lived overseas before they left the country again. I told them that we should meet with a lawyer to arrange all the paperwork regarding the inheritance of our old man's fortune. They told me they weren't interested in taking part. They said that they could cover the lawyer's fees and that if any money ended up being theirs, they authorized me to use it to open a foundation or to give it to a charity fund. In short, they did not want it nor need it. After all, they were in a different economical position, I guess. That wasn't the case for me. I thought I could restart my business ventures if I managed to get some capital from my dad. I tried to speak to my other brother about this issue, but he just avoided the topic and pretended to be very full in his agendas. Every time I tried to meet with him with the lawyer, he had something else to do. A month went by like this, and I grew tired of trying to reach him. So I went up to my lawyer and took him to check my dad's will on the main civil registry. I wasn't ready at all of the news I received when we got there. There wasn't anything left amongst his properties. All the real estate and the companies were trespassed a couple months before. To whom? Well, none other than my brother, the one that was taking care of him. Out of his $50 million net worth, all that remained of his possession were some measly $100,000. I asked them to check all about my father's properties, to show me the documents providing the transferring of his properties. They showed me a 60-page long document dated to 2 months before my father's decease. I checked my father's signature on it. All of them were shaky. Pretty different from his usual steady signature. Then I began filling the blank spaces in my mind. My dad wasn't in full possession of his facilities when he signed the transferring of his properties. I saw him. He was as compliant and obedient as someone as heavily medicated as him could be. He wasn't in sound and sober senses. I called my brother and my sister abroad to tell them about the situation. They thought it was feasible that my father gave everything to him since he was the one that took care of him in his final days. I'm sure that he wanted everyone to think that. I explained everything further, told them about the medications, and also that the lawyer that made the document wasn't his personal lawyer and his lifetime friend, but instead it was made by some lawyers recently hired. I presume my brother to scheme all is up. Then they began having their doubts, but since they were abroad and minding their own problems, they weren't willing to do much about it. I was on my own to take action. I confronted my brother about it. I went to his house and I asked him to explain everything. He just took a defensive stand, saying it was quite petty to go against what our father decided in his living days. I told him I saw him. I saw that around the days in which he signed those documents, and there's no way he could have been in his right senses while he held that pen and signed those documents. I told him I knew he was the one behind all this. Why wasn't my dad's personal lawyer the one in charge of redacting and introducing such an important document for him? There was no way this wasn't a scheme made by my brother to keep everything to himself. He avoided discussing things further and asked me to leave his house. Then I told my brother and sister abroad I was planning on taking legal action. I wouldn't feel well letting him get away with it. They agreed to leaving the matter in the hands of a jury and offered to send me money for legal expenses. I found myself a lawyer and built up a case. We introduced a claim in our local court district to dismiss any of the documents signed the few months before my dad passed. My brother had the resources to pay a lawyer buffet to keep the claim from reaching legal ruling. So the case went on and on for about 2 years. They tried all sorts of legal tricks to prolong the case until the budget my brother and sister abroad ran away. And even my own retirement fund took the toll. Since there was so much money at stake, my lawyer agreed to keep working on the case until we finally got a verdict. The case went on for another 5 months, and eventually it wasn't possible for us to prove without any trace of doubt that those documents were invalid. Beginning a whole new process to charge my brother for fraud would take much longer, and I agreed to pay my lawyer to pay his fees in the long run through a financial schedule, so I couldn't compromise to keep taking the legal way. My brother and sister abroad just gave up and did not mind more about it. I just couldn't. I kept track of my brother's ventures. What was he doing? What were his plans? I found out that he was selling everything at almost half its value. He even sold our father's mansion, the one we grew up in. I felt more and more sickened and mad at him. Then I found out about what his purpose by selling everything. He had a plan to buy a broad plot of land at a suburban area to build a huge shopping complex. He had made the arrangements with the commercial partners that would be in charge of the construction and renting the spaces inside to franchise companies alike. It was a huge venture with big profits at stake. I kept track of everything. I visited the land plot and noticed it was quite afar from any urban area. The process of thought behind that investment was that another construction company was planning to build a huge residential area surrounding the shopping complex. So, starting the constructions as of now was a long-term investment. If everything went okay and the residential area went through successfully, the plot of land and even the shopping complex value would skyrocket to the moon. I developed a plan to sabotage this venture. When asking permission to build a larger structure, official inspectors from the state are required to make an assessment of the land's characteristics to determine if it's in fact suitable to hold a safe structure. In that process of assessment, there's a whole wide range of tests that must be performed before the construction company gets a green light to start. I knew about this since I got involved in some construction projects myself before I settled for my own supermarket business. I won't go into many details, but I knew a guy that could alter the terrain in the plot of land. It was easy to smuggle a few truckloads of chemicals that would stop those tests from running smoothly, preventing the inspectors from giving an approval to the project. I started hiring these guys to smuggle the chemicals and pour them scattered through the land. He made sure through his own subordinates that each time the tests were about to be performed, the soil in the land would be adulterated and unsuitable. 1.5 years we did this. My brother's business associates were growing tired and seeing their project being held back and back again and again. Each of these tests performed involved a heavy fee that was paid each and every time. Every time the test failed, they had to hire people to clean the soil, dig away any impurities, and they just kept popping and popping up again. Finally, the inspector's board decided that since the parts involving the construction weren't able to prove that the soil was suitable, and all the recent tests had failed considerably, the land would not be tested anymore for a term of 5 years. My brother had to end his partnership with the associates. His business and personal economy were made a mess, and his other companies weren't doing so good either since he sacrificed so much time to pull this out. I went to him and pretended that all happened between us was water under the bridge. He accepted my, quote, apology, and we got to dinner and discussed our personal business. He told me about what happened with his shopping complex plan. I faked sympathetic and encouraged him to get rid of it. I told him I knew from a trustable source that the construction company that was planning to build the residential area, it had run into some problems regarding the soil too. They could not get their approval to build either, I told him. He was shocked and thought it made sense since their project was very close to his. I told him I would help him out. I told him I knew from our conversation that his businesses weren't doing so good lately. I told him in the last year I managed to break a few deals with some big companies and that my budget was doing great. I offered him around 25% of what he spent buying the plot of land and told him I would do it as a favor of him. Of course, I had to sell my own business and find some credit plans to pull this off, but he didn't even know that. He agreed and thanked my saying what a good brother I was. We closed the deal and I became the sole owner of the land. The residential area complexed around the land went through and it was a huge success. All of the houses and apartments were sold beforehand and were brought by the biggest real estate companies in the country. 5 years have passed since and I bought the plot of land from my brother. The value of land went up by 500% since. Not to mention that if I were to go ahead and partner up to build myself that shopping complex, I would triplicate that starting profit. I couldn't keep myself from letting him know. I met with him and we had dinner. I told him, quote, "Remember our father's fortune? The one he left to you on his final days?" He became really nervous as if I were going to take an offensive stand on that subject again. I told him, "How much was it?" He wouldn't say at first, but I pushed by saying I did not remember well and asked him to please freshen my memory. He told me a sum of money, and I told him, quote, "Hey, remember that plot of land I bought from you 5 years ago?" He nodded without looking me in the eyes. He must have seen it coming. I just signed a contract for a shopping complex construction there. The total profit expected from it is 3 times larger than what our father left you. Or, should I say, from what you took from him. He looked so dissatisfied, as if I just rubbed all over his face his own failure. I told him then, quote, "It's so unlucky that you could not benefit from it. It is just like someone was trying to keep you away from success. I guess you had it coming." Then I stood up and left, and I still get calls from time to time, trying to partner up and associate with me. I just tell him, quote, "I'm busy." I have to say, this story perfectly illustrates karma at its finest. Let me know if you guys have any similar stories like this about inheritance that has karma attached to it. I loved reading this story because I think that brother got everything he deserved. Drop your thoughts down below. Our next story that we're going to look at, it's a rather sad/emotional one, and the trigger warning is child death. So please know that before you watch the next story, but if you're enjoying these stories so far, click that like button and subscribe to the channel because we do this every single day. Here's story number 2. So, I'm 25 years old, female, and my nephew, who's 4, passed away 1 year ago because of cancer. It was right on my birthday, and there was no celebration, there was nothing. Everyone was devastated. My sister Denise is still grieving. She's in therapy and making some progress, but it's been slow. My family and I try to be as supportive as possible. Birthdays in my family are very important, and we throw huge parties. I believe and have been taught that parties and birthdays are important and should be cherished. Yesterday was my birthday. Obviously, I felt bad about the anniversary of my nephew's death, but I was a little down about not being able to celebrate like I used to, and my girlfriend knew that. In the morning, I went to Denise's house, stayed by her side until almost lunchtime, when my mother would stay with her. We didn't want to leave her alone, but no one could stay all day. I went to work, and at night, my girlfriend made a surprise at home. a candlelit dinner, and a small birthday cake. Something very intimate and for both of us, since my family was in a bad way. I did not post on social media, but my girlfriend posted a picture of us holding hands and the dinner she made with, "Happy birthday, love." My mom and Denise follow her on Instagram. Well, I woke up the next day to hundreds of text messages from my mom and Denise asking if I was celebrating, even though it was such a sad day, and how heartless I was to celebrate knowing my sister was in such a bad way. Even though I said it was a surprise, they called me cold, heartless, and insensitive, to the pain of others saying I should have refused to celebrate. I was just glad to celebrate because it's something important to me, and I didn't even realize when my girlfriend posted this photo on Insta. By the way, in case you're wondering, none of them remembered it was my birthday. Am I the a-hole, guys? Drop in the comment section down below what you would do. As sad as this story was and the extreme heartbreak I can only imagine they went through, I have to say I do agree with this comment I'm about to read. Not the a-hole, you did not make your mom or your sister celebrate with you. It was you and your significant other. Does Denise expect you to never celebrate your birthday again? Yeah, it's a tough situation, but at the end of the day, they weren't involving anyone else. It was just OP and significant other on the birthday. Guys, let me know your opinion on this story. I know it's kind of a touchy one, but tell me in the comments down below, what exactly would you do if you were in this situation? That's all the stories I have for you today. I hope you enjoyed it. As always, Mr. Reddito, we'll catch you tomorrow.